years ago. I first ran afoul of my senior administration, who, with a single voice, said, "Give that idea up. We do not want to have to explain to our wealthy alumni in the Midwest why a dean of engineering wants to mess with this stuff." And it basically has not changed for a long while. But I moved on and determined to pursue it nonetheless. And I had two caveats, maybe three, depending on how you want to count. I wanted the work to be first-class academic studies. I wanted to have someone on full-time appointment in the engineering school who could oversee the day-to-day operations, much as all our other top-notch exercises were pursued at Princeton. And finally, and it turns out most importantly, I wanted this person to be female, a woman, and to bring with her perspective that only a great female scholar could bring. That required a bit more of a search, but I prevailed. And here sits that outstanding female scholar of this topic, which you are going to be privileged, I believe, to hear about other dimensions of this work, and which I will testify here, bring an essential second component to the work. I am going to give Brenda her fair time. She's got all sorts of gadgets here to push to acquaint you with the vicissitudes and the fun that we have had pursuing engineering anomalies research together. I hope you will enjoy, I hope you will question, and I hope you will appreciate, as I alone have certainly appreciated, Brenda's contribution to the program. There you go.
Hi, I think I'm speaking through several mics, but that's okay. Hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you this morning. You know, it's hard to imagine that this is the 36th annual meeting. That means the society is about 37 or 38 years old, which is about actually a little more than half my lifetime. And that's scary. You can do the math and figure out how old I am. But I can remember attending the very first meeting that we had. I believe it was in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it was a very modest meeting. There were maybe a couple of dozen people there, and afterwards people said, well, that's that. I don't know if we'll ever be able to come up with any other topics to talk about. But here we are 36 years later, and we have a wonderful program that Bill and his colleagues have put together. And we still haven't run out of exciting topics, and we haven't run out of wonderful speakers. I look out on the audience, I see an awful lot of faces that I recognize from way back when. Most of you, as well as I, have gotten a little grayer as the years have gone by, but we're still at it. And anyway, it's just really a terrific pleasure to be able to celebrate this era of SSE. Now, to be honest, are we humming? Is there a hum in the... That's worse than a hum.
Try that.
Can you hear me now? Yes. All right. Now, as a disclaimer, technically speaking, I was not an SSE founder, okay? Over the years, I've been more of a den mother, which has been an interesting role in itself. As I've watched my young scouts grow and mature and gain confidence in themselves and watch their worldview evolving, and it gave me the opportunity to be able to nag them and criticize them as only a mother can. And I enjoyed that role immensely. I still do. But it was, as most of you know, a long time ago when a group of outcast scholars, people who had scholarly interests in topics that lay outside mainstream science, topics like reincarnation, UFOs, the Loch Ness Monster, psychic phenomena, survival, I mean, weird stuff like that, that were topics that were not accepted within the purview of mainstream journals or mainstream conferences. And they got together, a handful of them, maybe, I don't know, there were maybe 6 or 7 originally, and they said, well, you know, if we cannot get together at these scientific meetings, why don't we just have our own? And they decided to form a scholarly society, a professional society that would address topics that lay outside mainstream competence or mainstream interest. The idea was eventually to create a journal, which of course we did, and most of you have seen it, and that too is well along. It's a fine quarterly journal. It's refereed. It's got some wonderful book reviews. We would have annual meetings, which we have done, not only in the United States, but we've had biennial meetings in Europe, which have also been a success. The membership of the society has grown. Unfortunately, it has tended to also age. And one of our goals for the coming years is to try to look to the succession of SSE and to bring more young people, more creative, enthusiastic, and technologically sophisticated folks in to lead the society in the future. But those of you who know me know I'm fond of telling stories. So let me tell a story, a personal story that for me is kind of a parable for my view of the Society for Scientific Exploration. When I was a kid, maybe early adolescence, you know, that dreadful age when you're feeling insecure and you just want to be popular and you don't feel like you fit in and you're not sure who you are and all this other stuff. I was one of those. I guess I still am. I've just gotten used to it. I've even come to like it. But I had a cousin, and this cousin was one of the in crowd. She was a couple of years older than I was, and boy, I admired her. She was so cool. She was a cheerleader. She, you know, hung out. She had the best nice clothes and all this other stuff. And boy, that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. And she had a lot of friends, popular, went to parties. And I was sort of on the outskirts looking in. In fact, I hung out with a bunch of other misfits who, as I look back now, I realize were real honest-to-God beatniks. That gives you again how old I am. But they were people who I enjoyed being with because I could be myself. I didn't have to be putting on pretenses of, you know, trying to fit in. But as the years went by and as I matured, as I gained a little more confidence in myself, as I became comfortable not being one of the in crowd, I started to look at my cousin a different way. And one of my relatives had once said to me, you know, your cousin so-and-so really isn't that bright. And boy, I defended her. She was my model. Well, I came to realize, you know, she really wasn't that bright. She spent all of her effort creating a facade of sophistication, of knowledge, ability, you know, of, I'm trying to think of the right term. But I came to realize this was a cover. And it was really covering her own insecurity. Her need to sort of put me down subtly really was a way of making herself feel a little bit superior. And as I looked around to this in crowd, the popular kids who I wanted so much to join, I realized, you know, I don't really want to be one of them. They're fake. Okay, following the metaphor? SSE is sort of a misfit kid. If you want a beatnik organization, God, I'm dating myself. This was pre-hippie, mind you. But it was, when it started out, it too was looking up to the big kids, the popular kids. Many of the early council meetings involved, how do we get mainstream science to accept us? How do we get to be published in Nature and in Science? How can we become one of them? Of course, we learned painfully as the time went by that there was no way we were going to be one of them because we represented a threat to them. We were a threat to their absoluteness, okay? The paradigm that they represented that could not be challenged because we were raising questions like, well, let me say it this way, we were raising statements. Let me backtrack. When I was laboratory manager of PAIR, we used to have every year for about 10 years, we would get maybe 100 or so 10-year-old kids from a neighboring school district that would come on a field trip. And we would show them around the lab. We'd talk a little bit about scientific method, about probability, And we were very cautious. We were not pushing anomalies. We were talking science. And at each of these convocations, I would ask the kids, how many of you want to be scientists when you grow up? And there'd usually be a flurry of hands. And I'd say, you know, if you want to be a scientist, you have to learn how to say two very difficult things. The first of them is, I don't know. The second, which is a lot harder, is, I was wrong. And I remember one lovely little gal who looked at me and said, oh, Mrs. Dunne, I can't even say that to my brother. And I said, well, I didn't say it was easy, but I do maintain that principle to this day. If you want to be a good scientist, you have to be willing to say, I don't know. And all of us here are dealing with things that we don't know. They are all topics of high uncertainty and, you know, very little absolute knowledge. In fact, maybe the secret to studying anomalies is that there is no absolute. Maybe we'll come to that eventually. I think we've discovered in our pair research that one of the basic underlying principles of all of the anomalies we studied was uncertainty. You have to be able to say, I don't know, and you have to be able to concede that you're wrong without feeling threatened, without feeling, as some of our colleagues in the mainstream sciences have said to us, well, if what you're saying is right, well, then everything I've done in my life is wrong. And I would say, well, no, it's not wrong, it's just not complete. And they say, no, you don't understand, I'd be wrong. This scares them. It really does. I mean, I've seen their faces, I've felt their fear. Many of you have probably heard this story, but I think they were one of the most telling symbolic indicators of this was when we first started our pair lab. We didn't have a name for it. We were in a reconstituted storage area in the basement of the engineering school. Didn't have a room number or anything on it. And we had to put something there to indicate that, you know, we're here, okay? And it was just the lab. So I thought I was being terribly clever, and I put a Greek psi on the door. I thought psi is great. It stands for psychic phenomena, it stands for paranormal or whatever, and it stands for wave function, you know, in physics, and here we are in an engineering school. Well, the sign was up on the door for a while, and by the third time, he came over and stared at it with terrible terror in their face and said, why do you have a devil's pitchfork on your door? I thought, you know, this is going to be an interesting trip. One day I opened the door to go out and somebody was standing there staring, you know, with the look. I smiled, I said, no, it's not a devil's pitchfork, it's a Greek letter. And they backed away and said, how did you know what I was thinking? And I said, well, what kind of a lab do you think this is? At that point, we figured maybe we should take the devil's pitchfork off the door. So we took that down, we put up one of these signs with a spiral galaxy and an arrow that says, you are here. And I thought, okay. A week or so later, I come in one morning, and there's one of these grad students standing there staring at the door. And I walked up and he said, you know, that's not our galaxy. Wow, I said, thanks for telling me that. I'd hate to have a misleading sign on the door. And I ripped it off, walked into the lab and said, where am I? What kind of a place is this? These people have no sense of humor. They have no, I mean, this is worse than Never Never Land. Anyway, somewhere along the lines, Bob and I had decided that we really needed to have a name for the lab. And we went out to lunch one day. We were sitting in this restaurant that had these little, old tables and fancy whatevers. And Bob said to me, we need a name for the lab. I've been thinking about this. And what do you think of the idea of Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research? And I listened, I said, P-E-A, pear? I said, nah, we could do better than that. That doesn't grab me. So anyway, meanwhile, the waitress brings our lunch. Bob says, pass the salt. I pass him and reach out to pass him the salt shaker, and it's a little pewter pear. And I said, no, never mind. We're talking about it, trying to come up with an alternative. We finish our lunch, the waitress comes back and she said, can I interest you folks in some dessert? We have some fresh baked pear cake. I said, okay, I can't fight this because we're going to go outside and a pear is going to come and hit me in the head. Pear it is. And so at that point, we put a pear up on the door. I'm glad we didn't put an apple because pears are nice fruit. I mean, it's very hard to find some negative connotation to a pear. And we had that pear up there for many years. Towards the end of the program, I actually replaced it just because my mischievous self couldn't resist, with a picture of a gingerbread house. We had, people got very nervous because we were not permitted to have students in our laboratory from the university. We had people volunteering and coming by, but we could not take their students. We couldn't teach them. And we used to pretend, that this was really, the candy cabin in the woods. Come in, little child. Let me tell you some really nasty things. So anyway, I couldn't resist. Nobody actually challenged the gingerbread house. But by that time, I think they were used to us. Anyway, I've gotten off my track, and I have a tendency to do that, and I apologize. But let's get back to SSE, and I wanted to bring back this parable, this metaphor, this analogy of my relationship with my cousin and the high school in-crowd. SSE over the years has not gained acceptance. We're not going to. Until the mainstream can say I was wrong or I don't know, there's no way that's going to happen. What's going to happen is that we are going to be bringing new people in. Max Planck once put it beautifully. He said, new ideas. You can't change people's ideas. You have to wait until a new generation grows up and believes in it in the first place. And I'm saying that all wrong, but basically it's been paraphrased as science changes funeral by funeral. And that is what is happening. Gradually, there are changes. Many years ago, we had a volunteer operator who was a physics grad student. Not you, York, a different one. Although York was also came to us as a physics grad student for the same reason as this other one, who said, this is interesting stuff. I've got to see it to believe it. Well, anyway, this one heard Bob speak, and he came by and he said, I heard Dr. John give a talk about this stuff, and it was really interesting. And I went to speak to my advisor, who I regard as one of the most intelligent and sane people I know, and he sort of went ballistic. His face turned red, his voice went up, and he said, oh, that's all nonsense. We know that that's impossible, and John is a fraud. He said, I was really taken aback by his reaction, so I decided I really needed to see for myself. So he came by. He was an operator in our laboratory for a while, did some experiments, graduated, went on. And it was quite a few years later that Roger, who of course was also a member of the Pear staff for many years, said to me, did you see the article in such and such? And I said, no. He said, well, it seems that there is a new chairman of the physics department at Caltech. It's the guy who was our operator. Aha, that's how we're going to change the system. Okay? Funeral by funeral, step by step. Or as we used to have a motto in the Pear Lab, tell the young people. We won't go into where that came from. But that was the idea, and that's what SSE is about too. Tell the young people. There are so many young people, so many, even a lot of mainstream scientists who won't admit it, but who are interested in these topics, who are afraid to admit their interests, who are terrified by that horrible boogeyman of what will people think? Well, who cares what people think? We are real, we are authentic, and we are willing to admit we are wrong. We're willing to admit we don't know. And we need to attract more people and encourage more young people to be able to join this wonderful misfit community. We won't call them beatniks anymore. I'd rather like that. We all had long hair, you know, and dark eyeshadow and bongo drum. It was cool. But that's where SSE has to go. We are no longer looking for approval by the in crowd, by the popular group. We are the vanguard. We're out there in front. We're leading the troops. We are setting the future. We need the next generations to follow us. Now, I love all of you. It's great. I look out, but there's an awful lot of gray heads out there and up here. We need more young people drawn into the society. Many years ago, when I was appointed or elected education officer, which a position I held for many years, and we tried to attract more young people. Oh, we gave them reduced membership fees, reduced registration fees. We even offered a prize for the young investigators' presentation. We had one winner of that prize. I don't think anybody has since applied. We would have these, oh, good. We do have another one, great. All right, thank you. But this is where we have to go. I resigned a couple of years ago. Chantal now is the education officer. And she's carrying on that tradition and encouraging people. This is why she's holding these lunches and these meetings, trying to encourage young folks to have discussion groups at their colleges and talk to their friends. SSE is willing to bring speakers on different topics to these groups. And there are a number of groups now. Chantal has a group in California. Garrett Modell has a group in Boulder that get together to talk about it. And I think there's a couple of others here and there. We need more of that. This is where we're going to get our new blood. We're going to try to collaborate with other organizations that have younger, enthusiastic people, but who need the more mature, experienced leadership that we could offer. We have a lot to offer. We have a great journal. We have great meetings. We have great membership. And I don't know what I'm doing time-wise. Will somebody stop me when I 5 minutes? Okay. That's about all I need. Except I just lost track of what it was I was going to say. I was talking about, getting, young people and whatever, and the involvement in it. I know where I was going, and this is terribly important. Every year at our council meetings, the issue has come up of how do we attract more people, how do we get increase our membership, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a funny position about that. I have no aspiration to seeing SSE have thousands and thousands of members and loads of money and have its meetings in parallel sessions and not know any of the people who are there. Because for me, over these 36 annual meetings, and I have been to all but one of them, and most of the European ones as well, the real appeal is seeing my friends. The real attraction and the enjoyment of these meetings has been meeting other people, meeting other folks who are misfits like I am, or like we are. People who are looking to share some of their experiences that they can't talk about with their faculty. They can't talk about it at American Physical Society meetings. People who have seen and heard and done things that are just off the map, and who are lonesome. They're feeling very lonely. But here we can get together, we can talk about this, we know each other. It's a delight. The older I get, the harder it is to remember names, but damn it, it's great to come in and see faces that I recognize. And that really is, I think, one of the most critical components of SSE, the community, the friendships, a place of safety, a refuge where we can go once a year and talk about stuff we can't talk about anywhere else with folks who understand and aren't going to look at us and go, oh my God, are you one of those? You know the look. You've all seen it. And I want to encourage that. I want to encourage all of you, especially, it's wonderful to see all of the new folks who are here for the first time. I hope you will come back. I hope you will become involved in the society. Volunteer. We're a volunteer organization. Everything is done by volunteers. Come and whatever skills you have, come bring them. Organize discussion groups at home. Offer to, well, I guess we don't lick stamps anymore, but, but the equivalent thereof. We can always use people who maybe could spare a couple of hours a week or even a couple of hours a month to help out. People who could write press releases. People, there's a lot that SSE could do. There's so much more that we could be if we all work together. We used to have a little sign on the wall at Pear that said, if we all work together, we can totally disrupt the system. And I'll leave you with that note. Thank you. Incidentally, I should mention that Bob was a real founder. I just sort of came along to hold his briefcase.
We're presenting Brenda with the plaque. 2017 Founders Lectureship, Brenda J. Dunne, in recognition of her innumerable contributions to the study of scientific anomalies.